Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Fins Up Network. It's Ben Morgan. And yesterday we graded the offense. That means today we are shifting our focus to the defense. We're going position by position, giving out grades through the Miami Dolphins' first 10 games of the NFL season. If you haven't done so already, make sure you go back, check out the offensive grades video. I'm going to have a link to that in the comments, in the description. I'll make it readily available for you. But before we get started today, just like that video, I want to hear your grades as well. So drop those defensive positional grades in the comments. Let's chat more about it there. But just like yesterday, we got a lot to get to. So let's start with the defensive line. And I'm giving this a B plus, a B plus. So I know people's beef typically with the defensive line this year, it's low sack totals. And I get it. They got 3.5 on the entire season, but I urge you to keep in mind with this defense, with most defenses, it's not always the primary job for the interior defensive lines. In regards to pass rush, sure. End of the day, yeah, you want to get to the quarterback. I can't argue that. But think about what they do. They take on so many other offensive linemen. And guess what? They're taking on those offensive linemen. They're eating up those bodies, and you're letting your edge players and you're letting your linebackers be the ones that get to the quarterback. End of the day, that's a lot of the ask. And our defensive line is doing that. Because unless you have these elite defensive tackles, we're talking about like the Aaron Donalds of the world, you're typically not going to get these high sack totals from these players just because of how muddied the middle of that line of scrimmage is. So yeah, they don't have the huge sack numbers, but you didn't really expect that from them coming into the season anyways. Those stats, they belong to the Melvin Ingrams, the Jalen Phillips, the Bradley Chubbs of this team. We're going to get to those guys here in a little bit. But where this defense makes its presence felt is the run game. 16th in the NFL in rushing yards allowed per game. But I would argue that is one of the most misleading Dolphin stats from this entire season. And you know why. It's because of the scrambling quarterbacks and the way that they have just gashed us on the ground this year. So while, yeah, some of that blame has to go to the defensive linemen, I will concede to that. But this defensive line has actually been really damn good at stopping opposing teams' actual running backs. They're allowing under 70 yards per game to actual running backs, just 3.7 yards per carry. So really good there. And that's not against just nobodies either. We're talking Nick Chubb, Dalvin Cook, Breece Hall, Joe Mixon. We're talking guys like that. And the last thing about the defensive line here, people will point out Christian Wilkins. He'll get some heat because you expect these big game-changing plays, these sack totals, because he was the first-round pick, because he had the high draft capital. Well, guess what? He does have 9 tackles for a loss, which if you look at just interior defensive linemen, I believe that's 5th most of everyone at the position. So yeah, it's not always super pretty up front, but this unit is actually one of the Miami Dolphins' stronger units. Let's jump into the edge rushers. I'm giving this a B plus because, man, we have been on a wild ride so far. That's how I'll describe the edge rusher position this year. Just a wild ride this year. We go from the beginning of the season, Melvin Ingram wins the Defensive Player of the Month in September. And then all of a sudden we find ourselves in the situation where we just simply can't get to the quarterback when we rush 4. Well, then all of a sudden we can't run our zero blitz and we can't run it effectively because of how depleted the secondary is, because of the personnel issues that we have. And then all of a sudden, Jalen Phillips starts heating up. He's getting to be one of the league's most efficient pass rushers. The win rate is there. And the sacks are starting to slowly come. But then guess what we do? We make the splash move at the trade deadline. You get one of the all-around best edge rushers in the league in Bradley Chubb. So if you look at our last game, when we played a more typical, stationary, traditional quarterback in Jacoby Brissett, instead of one of those Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields, Josh Allen type of guys, and we saw how good this pass rush can be when even only rushing 4. It was statistically their best game against their offensive line, just rushing 4. Their win rate, their percentage of getting to the quarterback was higher despite their blitz percentages in that game being the lowest of any game this season. They had 3 sacks against Jacoby Brissett. But if you watched that game, I'm sure you did. If you watch it back, they could have had a pile more. Jacoby Brissett actually did a really good job of escaping last second and getting rid of the ball multiple times. So that number could have been higher. And I will agree, earlier in the season, it was pretty frustrating kind of watching that for a while. But man, tell me you watched that game against the Browns and you didn't have a good time watching those guys get after that quarterback while playing with a lead. So hopefully we get to see that a little bit moving forward. But I'm going to go B plus despite the low team sack totals. We're still only 24th in the NFL in sacks this year. But I harp on it all the time. There's more to the edge position than just strictly sacks. The individual win rates have been good. The sacks will eventually come. Plus, I have loads upon loads of confidence in the Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips duo. So I got a B plus there. Moving on to the linebackers. I got a B. So linebackers, interesting. It's another positional group that likely gets a bit more flack than it deserves. And no, we don't have the household name at linebacker. We don't have the young do-it-all guy that has all this hype surrounding him. But let's take a second, discuss these guys, their roles, and how they're actually doing a pretty good job in the roles that they have. But no, I mean, they're not flawless. It's not like I'm giving them A, I'm giving them a B. But check a few things out here. Landon Roberts. You think about him, you think of him as this hard-nosed, middle, traditional, run-stuffing linebacker. Well, guess what? He leads the team with 62 tackles. He actually does have a sack and a half this season, and he's second on the team with 4 tackles for a loss. And remember, back to that Browns game again. Who set the tone early with that hit on Nick Chubb? Landon Roberts was that guy. He set the tone defensively in that game. Now look at Jerome Baker, second on the team in tackles, also has a sack and a half. And if you think about what his job is, outside of just being on the field and performance, he's the brain of the defense. He is the guy that Mike McDaniel and Josh Boyer count on to basically be the quarterback of the defense. And I know there's a recent play in people's minds with Jerome Baker, and it's going against one-on-one DeAndre Swift, where DeAndre Swift basically has a read option. Like, I'm gonna go out, can I cut in, or I'm gonna cut out? Well, he gets to make that decision based on what he sees. Him and Goff are on the same page. Easy touchdown. Jerome Baker looks bad on the play. But I tell you what, a running back of DeAndre Swift's caliber, athleticism, you're on an island with him in the red zone inside like the 5 or 10 yard line. Good luck. That is a hard play for everyone. So I don't think we want to be too hard on that. And just remember in general, what we said about the Dolphins linebackers going against running backs. Who do you think getting all these tackles? I just said Landon Roberts and Jerome Baker are first and second in tackle. So they're the ones that are getting the job done there. It's those scrambling quarterbacks. That's where we struggle. That's where the biggest downgrade for this unit comes, in my opinion, because you look, we drafted Channing Tindall. He was that guy we said, if he's going to get early playing time this year, it's going to be in that spy role. And we've hardly seen it. We've actually seen a little bit more of Duke Riley, who doesn't come without flaws either, but he's actually played some pretty damn good ball this year as well. But at the end of the day, the numbers don't lie. Scrambling quarterbacks have just absolutely murdered us. So that remains my biggest issue with the position. And I even considered doing like a B minus or a C plus. But really, outside of that, this position has been all right this year. It's just too hard for me to drop that grade any lower. But wrapping up the position, yeah, like most of you, the one thing I'd like to see more of, a little bit of Channing Tindall. Sprinkle him in a little bit more. Let's see what we have here. Hopefully we see that soon. Let's move on to the cornerbacks. I got to see here. So heading into the offseason, I'd argue that cornerback was probably first or second strongest position on the entire team, especially the defense. But then we got Byron Jones, who hasn't been activated. And Nik Needham goes down early to a season-ending injury. And Trill Williams has his season-ending injury already in the preseason. So then who do we turn to? You got the Keion Crossens, the Kader Kohous, the Justin Bethels of the world. Guys that we never really anticipated seeing much of. And if we did, it would be at a very limited capacity. But man, these guys have essentially been elevated to starter roles. Now look at our top cornerback, Xavien Howard. Compared to what he's been doing the last couple of years, he's a year older. He's got injuries to both groins that he's been playing through. And in the midst of all of this, he's been basically asked to do more this year for the Dolphins defense than he has in any other year during his time in Miami. And I'm not saying he can't play better or anything like that. Trust me, I want to see the old X. I want to see that again this year. But when he's been healthy in the past, the strategy on defense with him is he's kind of stayed to one side. It's very rare that he's been tasked with following one wide receiver all over the field. Well, guess what? This year happens, and he's been banged up. And now we're asking him to do this almost on a regular basis just because of how depleted our secondary is. So no, Xavien Howard isn't having a typical Xavien Howard year, and that's part of the reason for the lower grade in general there. Because no, we're not seeing Xavien Howard record an interception on damn near like a game or an every other game basis like we saw in years in the past. And yeah, he has been on the wrong end of some of the bigger plays this year. But in general, we've got to be happy with the performance that we've kind of seen from these other fill-in guys, the Kader Kohous, the Justin Bethel, because I mean, Justin Bethel comes in, he's had some very, very big plays kind of sporadically over the last 4 weeks. But when his number's been called, when he's been asked to step in and produce, he's done it. And then you look at Kader Kohou. I don't think any of us have any issues with Kader Kohou. He's a top 15 graded cornerback right now by Pro Football Focus. So no, it's not all doom and gloom at the cornerback position. It's just really not what we expected or hoped for when we were projecting this team this offseason. But I'm sticking with the C for now. Hopefully either Byron Jones come back, fingers crossed, not holding my breath, or these young guys, the Bethels, the Kohous, hopefully they continue to flash. Hopefully they continue to hold this unit together. Because look at the schedule. We're about to get tested. They need to continue to hold it together. Let's wrap things up with the safeties. So I got a B+, but safety is another position you look at and you almost feel a bit disappointed is probably not the right word, but I'll use it anyways, just due to all the offseason hype. But then after you dive in and you realize how much their situation has changed compared to what was originally practiced and planned for, and look at how well they're doing despite all that. Because you go into the season thinking Jevon Holland, Brandon Jones, one of the league's most intriguing and best young safety duos. Already one of the best blitzing safety duos in the league. Well, then guess what happens? Brandon Jones gets hurt. He's out for the year. We have other injuries along the defensive backfield. It changes up people's positions. Injuries happen, and now you can't zero blitz near as often, near as effectively with the personnel that you currently have. So that's resulted in Jevon Holland playing a bit of a different position than what he used to his rookie year, where he doesn't blitz, I should say at all, but near as often as what we would like him to at this point in time. So you're hoping for these sacks, you're hoping for these interceptions, you're hoping for these big hits from Jevon Holland because, yeah, he did flash. He did all that stuff as a rookie. We're like, dude, this guy's ceiling is huge. He's going to have a huge second-year jump. Well, now we're not seeing all that because he's playing in a completely different role just because of how much the defense has had to shift. Now, he has got 2 interceptions. The whole team only has 4. I'd love to see an increase over that over the second half of the season moving forward here. But you just feel like this group should have more just because, yeah, we did have those lockdown cornerbacks and we do have these edge rushers that can get to the passer. It can lead to quarterbacks making mistakes. But like I said, the defense has just had to simply change up so much. So the production just hasn't quite been there. But I do want to end with Jevon Holland here. He's been good. And obviously, Brandon Jones was doing well. I think he was near the top of the team lead in tackles before his injury happened. Eric Rowe's been all right. Verone McKinley, he's had some growing pains. Yes, he's been exposed a couple of times as a rookie, but an undrafted free agent rookie, I mean, we're going to live with that. But guess what? He got his call up from the practice squad. He earned his spot on the team's 53-man roster. So I'm kind of good with the position in general. I'm going to stick with that B+ for the time being. But that is what I have for the defense. But like I said, definitely take some time. If you haven't yet, go back, check out this same type of video. But for the offense, drop your defensive grades in the comments below. Let's carry on the conversation there. And I will be back yet later this week with 2 Houston Texans preview videos. So stay tuned, subscribe, and make sure you're checking those out as well. But that is my time for today, Dolphins fans. And until next time, Fins